So today we're looking at Sichos HaRan 86, Pei Vav. Be'ezras Hashem, this Sicha is relevant on many levels. It's relevant to some of us, Be'ezras Hashem, in the context of going to chossonas, going to weddings. It is specifically relevant to some of those who are on the group, joining us now live, or are going to be, Be'ezras Hashem, listening to this, who are actually going to be having their own chossonas very soon. So mazel tov to everybody who finds himself in that wondrous category. And Be'ezras Hashem to those who are awaiting their zivug, that's going to be also Bakar of Mamish. Be'ezras Hashem, we should all be by all of each other's simchas, along with all of Am Yisrael and the whole world in Yerushalayim. But it's, I would say, more fundamentally and universally applicable, because this Sicha, as we're going to see, which is all about weddings, is really not about weddings at all. Or, more accurately stated, this Sicha about weddings is a Sicha about the essence of what it is to be a Jew. Is the Sicha about the essence of reality, which is really what weddings are all about. And I want to just take a minute to explain what I mean before we jump into the actual Sicha, all b'siyata d'shmaya, with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and with a tremendous amount of gratitude to all of you for being here and for taking the time to learn with me. Sometimes when we refer to symbolism, we think about things within our created world, which we would consider to be reality, and we will suggest that if there is a deeper level of reality, we can look at certain things within our world and assume that this or that object or concept or person or place or time is symbolic of a deeper concept, a deeper element within reality, something that goes beyond what the actual object or item is. This is one form of spiritual depth, where we look at certain elements within creation and we can point to this and say, this is a symbol for a very profound idea, a very profound experience. This symbolizes something more ethereal, either on the level of something that we understand conceptually, something that happened in the past, something that's truer than what our eyes are able to see, but it's a symbol. And this is one layer of connecting to the depth within reality, which we call symbols. Al pi Kabbalah, from the perspective of the mystical tradition of Yiddishkeit, particularly channeled through the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and his disciples, down through Rebbe Nachman and his disciples, there was a very, very different approach to the potential depth that is to be experienced within reality. And the difference was that things are not only symbolic of deeper realities, but things that we encounter and experience within this layer of reality are actually the manifested code of those very spiritual energies that exist on deeper strata of experience, on deeper layers of what is possible to connect to within this reality. So to give an example, from the standpoint of the human body, on one level, you can look at the human hand, and on a very simple level, we can say that the right hand is a symbol of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's might. Because generally speaking, for most people, the right hand is the hand that we use to be active with, to write, and to throw a ball, or whatever else we might be doing. Whatever activity requires us to use our hands, for most people, their right hand is symbolic of power. And so if we want to make a reference to a more spiritual or a more meta or philosophical concept, we would say that psukim that refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's might are going to make use of the concept of Yemincha Hashem, your right hand, Ne'edari B'Koyach, represents and symbolizes strength. Meaning to say there's two different realities. There's our reality, and there's the reality vis-a-vis the spiritual realm. The reality vis-a-vis the Creator. And these two things, again, this mahalach, are fundamentally separate. But if we want to have a little bit of a glimpse into that other realm, we can point to completely disconnected elements within our physical space and say that for one reason or another reason, this or that element is symbolic of that concept. But from the perspective of Kabbalah, really founded on a pasuk in Eov, which says, "Mi besari, from my flesh, echazeh Elokai, I can see my Creator from my flesh, from the physical," and not just alluding to the human's own body, but from all of physicality, echazeh Elokai, deeper than simply having illusions or symbols to a spiritual reality. I can see the divine. So on that level, it's much deeper. It's not that the right hand happens to be an element of power, and so we would use that as a symbol for God's power. No. It's much deeper. If the right hand in the human body has any power in this element we call Tselem Elokim, it's because it is a manifestation within this realm of that very power we refer to as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's midah of overpowering chesed, energy, expression, extension, expansivity. You hear the difference? On one hand, there's a symbol, and on the other hand, we look at these elements and we say, this is the very thing itself. Not simply symbolic of a completely different idea that happens to be connected in one way or another. This is it. This is the thing. This is the thing. And this is true across the gamut of Kabbalistic speculation or study of the way in which different elements of the physical world all fit into the 10 basic elements of the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself throughout creation, which we call either the 10 spheros or the 10 midos of Hashem, among which are divided the colors, for example, and the different days of the week, and the 4 levels of existence. We speak about a lot in the shiur, rocks, and other inanimate objects, plant life, animals, and humans, these 4 elements, or fire, air, earth, and water, different physical elements which we look toward not as symbols of a sublime reality, but as emanations of that very sublime reality, ultimately rooted in the singular light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that when refracted through all of these different prismatic tools, becomes reality around us, filtered down through what's referred to as the Seder Hashtalshalos, or the chain of emanation. And just off the bat, before we get into the actual piece, you and I think at this point, if I'm coming across clearly enough, can understand that these 2 different ways of approaching spiritual depth have completely contrasting implications for the way that we experience this world. Because in the first element, it's very beautiful that this world has so much symbolism, and there's so much symbolic depth in everything that there is, and we can find ways that every element of creation is alluding to deeper spiritual realities. I mean, it's a gewalt. It's beautiful, and it's wondrous, and it's incredible. To be able to live on that level is amazing. Is already amazing, and that would already be a very, very big accomplishment if we, as Orthodox religious Jews, who are supposed to be the heirs of the most spiritual of all traditions, were able to at least, so to speak, live on that level where we were always looking for the depth in everything, and so on and so forth. But in the second mode, it's not simply that we live within a realm of potential symbolic meaning, but that we are quite literally swimming in the divine. We are quite literally experiencing a direct revelation of godliness within every single moment in time, within every single place in space, within every single circumstance. That is the sum total of a great many different elements within time and space that come together to produce a particular moment in our stories that are unfolding all the time. It's all Hashem. And now we're coming closer to understanding what the Hasidim meant when they said Ein od milvado doesn't simply mean that there is no God other than Hashem, but that Ein od milvado. There is quite literally nothing other than an experience of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in each and every moment of life. Why am I beginning with this very lengthy introduction? Because the comment that I made in the beginning about weddings and about the way in which this Sicha, which is all about weddings, is really not simply about weddings, but is really about the essence of Yiddishkeit, which is itself the foundation of weddings, is the primary example of this whole concept. It isn't that there is a concept of Kudsha B'richu, as we're going to see, the transcendent element of God, the creator as creator, and then there is the indwelling presence of God, which we call the Shechina, the more feminine element, the more hidden, concealed, latent godliness that exists within each and every particle of physicality. There are these two elements, and we have to try to bring them together. Oh, and also, there's this thing called a man, and there's this thing called a woman, who, if it's matim, will become bride and groom, and that they ultimately get together under a chuppah canopy and have a unification, in which sense we can say that, oh, this is a symbol for a much deeper spiritual concept. No. The only reason that there's a thing called a male, and the only reason there's a thing called a female, and the only reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world in such a way where this male and this female have such a deep longing for companionship that is ultimately solidified in the bond of Erisin, Kedushin, Nisuin, so that ultimately new life can be channeled down into the world, is because, not that they're symbols of, but is because they are the emanative extension of this thing called Kudsha B'richu, the transcendent element of the Creator, and this thing called the Shechina, which is the indwelling presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These are not two separate things, they are one and the same. They are one and the same. So when we approach it in this way, a wedding is not just a really beautiful moment within the human experience that also may have some spiritual depth. It is quite literally the sum total of the most intimate and intense spiritual experience that is ever possible that we witness taking place under the chuppah. It is an expression of the essence of Yiddishkeit, not simply a beautiful symbol for deep spiritual concepts. So I just wanted to begin with this very, very important introduction before we jump into the piece that I think will contextualize and make it a little bit easier for us to be able to go step by step and really dig deep into Rebbe Nachman's world of symbolism that may take us more than one shiur, but let's try to get through however much we can get through, all b'siyata d'shmaya, again with the help of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so the tzaddik begins. The reason that, at least it used to be a custom, and some of these are defunct as far as I'm aware, and maybe still in some places in some sects within Yiddishkeit, they have these minhagim, but I don't think necessarily that all of these minhagim have been preserved. But at one time there was a minhag where they would begin the wedding with milsa de b'dichusa, with words of jest, with jokes. Before this process, before these jokes, they would say Allah, Ayin Lamed Aleph, which of course is rooted in the word aliyah, to go up, to ascend. And they would start the jokes with Allah, go up. What does this mean? Remez, says Rebbe Nachman, it is a hint and a symbol. She'isha oyle imay, ve'ene yeredas imay. There's a Gemara in Ksubis, two different places where without getting into the broader halachic implication, but the concept of the Gemara is that a woman can only have her status elevated along with her husband, but not degraded along with her husband. This has implications in one place in the Gemara about the funeral and what he's required to provide for her, because different strata of the society had different expectations with regard to how the levaya would look. And we paskin isha, and this is the way that the halacha paskins, isha oile imai, that if a woman is from a lower societal status and marries somebody of a higher societal status, she can only ever oile imai, she can only ever go up with him. Ve'ena yoredes imai. But if she marries someone of a lower social status, her status does not get taken away, because she's now joining together with somebody from a lower status. That's what the Gemara means. Rebbe Nachman says there's a deeper implication. If you're beginning the wedding with jokes and with humor and with joy, and there's a certain clarity, we've mentioned this in the past with regard to joking, there's a certain clarity that life is not meant to be taken so seriously as we would need to take life if you and I were in charge of this thing called life. Then it's very heavy. But if there's a God in the world who's running things in a way that we're ultimately going to experience when we say, that at that moment where the greatest realization is that, like, we had no idea what was going on all along, and we're going to have nothing else that we're able to do but laugh. So if we're beginning the wedding with this incredible deep joy, so then we must precede that comedy with this word Allah. That what's about to take place is that we're in a way giving a bracha to the kallah, that she should join together with her chosson to be, in a way of aliyah to a life of kol simcha v'toy v'tainug, joy and goodness and pleasure, aval eni yaredes imai. But that the purpose of this unification, chas v'shalom, is never that the woman should be dragged down. On the contrary, that together they're beginning their journey of aliyah, of climbing a mountain, so that she can be an ezer kenegdai, and so that together he and she can carry on their journey of spiritual development, bolstering each other, aiding each other in growth, in rising. When we go back to the context of understanding that the root of the male energy comes from the concept of the transcendent element of godliness, the creator, so to speak, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that the Isha is the concept of the Shechina, the indwelling presence of Hashem, and again, not just the concept symbolically, but is the manifestation of that energy that we call Malchus, or the Shechina, or Kavod, as we're going to see. So then we understand that if there's any Gilui, if there's any revelation of godliness, what's the purpose of that? Is to draw out the Shechina, to awaken the longing that all of creation has for its creator. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in a way of a nes, a way of a miracle, or hashgacha pratis in our lives, what does that awaken within our hearts, where the Shechina is embodied in the form of the neshama? We want to draw ourselves close to that. And so that's what's taking place at a wedding, where the chosson walks down the aisle and he's standing there waiting. There's a giloy of the light of Kudsha B'richu. Naturally, that's going to draw the kallah out. And together they're going to be oile with milsa dibdichusa. Together they're going to rise into the consciousness of jest, the consciousness of simcha that comes from the realization that we can let go and let God, as the colloquial expression goes. So this is, Rebbe Nachman starts us off with Allah b'milsa dibdichusa isha oile imai ve'ena yeredes imai chas v'shalom, that they should only rise in their spiritual growth and not the opposite. Let's carry on. Ma'ashem echasen es kallah v'dechtuch. This, that they do what's called, even today, a badekin tza'if, where they cover the bride's, the kallah's face with the veil, which might have its root biblically, certainly has its root biblically in Yitzchak and Rivka. But says Rebbe Nachman on a deeper level, Ki kallah remezes l'Rachel, like we said earlier, the kallah doesn't just symbolize, but the kallah is the manifestation of the spirit of what's called Rachel, or the Shechina. The Shechina, which is, again, the possibility of creations experiencing the divinity within themselves and within all of existence. What we call emunah, real emunah, experiential faith. V'tzadik be'emunasa yichya, what it means to live with emunah. So this is called Rachel. And the Shechina is referred to in the Zohar Kodesh, this is very, very deep, as ulemta shapirta deles le'einin, as a beautiful maiden, deles le'einin, that has no eyes. And of course over here it means in a very deep metaphysical way, not a physical concept. It's alluding to the concept that when a person is really connected and activated on the level of Shechina, their ulemta shapirta deles le'einin, they're able to live in a state where the eyes are irrelevant. This is the concept of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, where we cover our eyes, where we understand that it's irrelevant what my eyes see. Goes back to the beginning, where we spoke about the first Nekuda, just one point ago, when we spoke about Milsa de B'dichusa Az Yimal Yisrael Pinu, Emuna, Aliyah. When a person embodies that faith, where I don't need to see everything all the time, I don't need to be able to point a finger at it, but a person submits with bittul. A person admits to not always having the answers all the time and not needing to. But a person is batuach, hashlich al Hashem yahavcha, to cast his burden onto God, v'hu yichal kalecha, as the pasuk says, and he will sustain you, or as some tzaddikim interpret, it itself, the very act of casting, will sustain you. Being a person who's able to cast a burden. And like Rebbe Nachman says, why does it say cast? Why doesn't it say place? Because it means that even when God seems incredibly distant, Hashlech al Hashem yahavcha, cast it a great distance if you need to. To be able to move into that space of ulemta shapirta deles le'einin, that I can walk with my eyes closed in the pitch black darkness. Lo yira ra ki ata yimadi Ribbana Shalom. I don't fear evil because you're with me. You're guiding me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are my light. Ki ata ta'ir neiri. You illuminate for me the candle of life. Hashem Elokai yagia chashki, as David HaMelech says in Tehillim, you banish the darkness. So this is all hinted to in the veil that we place upon the bride, who's the concept of the Shechina, that if the Shechina is to be activated within our lives and to be able to live in this way of emunah, it has to be, the eyes have to be covered. She's embodying now the quintessence of emunah, which is the highest state of the Shechina as revealed within our neshamas, is to live with the capacity to have our eyes closed for a good portion of the time and to follow the hints that are constantly scattered along the path of life by Kutcha Brichu, by the Master of Heaven and Earth. Gam Remez, it's also a hint to the Bechina al Bechinas, the Pasuk Mishlik Kfoida Likim Haster Davar. The glory of God is Haster Davar, is to conceal the matter. HaKadosh Baruch Hu acts in hidden ways. Elokim is many times a reference to the Shechina, because the Shechina is connected to the spiritual concept of Malchus, and the Pasuk says, Elokim Malki Mikedem. Malchus and Elokim are bound together, even though Elokim could also be a reference to Bina, without getting to the whole thing now. Elokim and Malchus. And so Kvod Elokim is Haster Davar. And that also goes connected to Alemta Shapirta Deles Le'einin. We're not always going to see things all the time, but it's up to us through the Sod of Emunah to reveal the capacity or potential for Hashem to be experienced dafka when we don't see. The Emunascha, when do we have Emunah? Dafka Baleilos. What does it mean Baleilos? When we can't see anything. Ulemta Shapirta Deles Le'einin. This beautiful maiden whose eyes are covered. Kvoida Likim Haster Davar. That is the revelation of the Shechina when Haster Davar. So this is a good thing for the chassanim among us to be able to have in mind, and the kallahs, when they experience this covering over, have in mind the real deep spiritual revelation that's taking place in you and in her. Not just again symbolic. We are giluyim of these great lights. We are giluyim. Like Rebbe Nachman says in the context of the 6th lesson in Likutei Moharan Torah Vav, without getting into the broad presentation of that whole sugya now. But he says at the very end, he says, don't think that Kabbalistic unifications only take place on the level of the Kabbalah, and all these tzirufei shemos and having in mind this shame and that shame. Says Rebbe Nachman, he says, we activate these yichudim just by doing the things that they really allude to in the human experience, because this is where it's at. This is where it's at. Mi besari echse elokah. And so by the chosson going and covering over the face of the bride, we're awakening this deep concept, this deep sod of emunah. Okay, we move on. This, that, I think even today, lahavdil, I think in the non-Jewish world as well, or at least in some cultures, they throw like wheat or kernels, barley, or they throw oifin, different kinds of grain. Lirmais, and over here, some words are missing, chaser. But he continues, why they specifically throw oifin, they throw these grains of wheat at the chosson. Lirmais is a reference to the pasuk in Yecheskel that says, El asher yeh shama haruach laleches, shama yelcho haifanim. The pasuk says, I don't think it's the exact wording of the pasuk, but it's close, it's similar enough, that where the ruach traveled, that's where the oifanim traveled. Where the ruach traveled, that's where the oifanim traveled. Now let's take a step back for a minute. This is very deep. It's very, very deep. We've been speaking this whole time that the kallah is a reference to the Shekhinah, which is the indwelling presence of Hashem. We've been speaking this whole time that the Shekhinah is connected to Malchus. That is the concept and the inyan of this physical created world, our experience of limitation in this realm, right? And the Zohar HaKadosh, and again, this is something we've spoken about in previous shiurim, connects all these concepts to speech, to dibur. On a very basic level, we can now have a deeper understanding, and we haven't really gotten to the deeper understanding yet, but on some level, we can understand that this is what it means, that God created the world with speech, right? Because the physical world and the potential to find godliness in it is going to be God's creation of the physical world. And that all happened through speech. In the words of the Zohar Kadosh, Malchus Peh. This element of Malchus, God's kingdom, which is impossible without the experience of created beings, as the Ramchal tells us many times in the Arizal, Ein Melech below Am, right? In order to be a king, in order to reveal his kingship, Hashem had to create you and me. Had to, so to speak, create in accordance with his will, created human beings. So in this realm of Malchus, Peh, that comes about in the realm that was created through the divine speech, through the Asara Ma'amaro Shebehem Nivru Shemayim Va'aretz, which, as the Zohar tells us, is really founded on the Asaras HaDibros that represent the spiritual code that sits at the core of creation. Istako ba'oraisa, Hashem looked at the Torah, Ubara Alman created the world. Malchus Peh. Now, if you think about it very deeply, and this is such a deep concept, I hope that I have the privilege of giving it over clearly to all of you sweet, precious Jews. What a privilege. Shreinu. If you think about speech, there are really two components to speech. The component of the actual klei hadibur, of the mouth, which is divided in Pnimius HaTorah to 5 different areas of the mouth, and the whole aleph bays are split up into 5 different categories of sounds that are produced through 5 different areas of the mouth, the lips and the tongue and the palate and the teeth and the throat. I think that's 5. All the different areas of the mouth. That's only stage 2. Because stage 1, in order to have anything for the klei hadibur, for those 5 elements which are wrapped up into the last hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of course, Gematria 5, without getting to that now, but in order for those capacities to have anything to quantify or to qualify, there needs to be a call, there needs to be a voice. And when we produce the voice, that sends the voice up through the vocal cords, produced by the vocal cords, And that sends the voice through the mouth, and then we utilize our klei hadibur, all the different parts of the mouth, to be able lachtoch, to divide that otherwise unified voice into all the different sounds that become communicable language, so that we can communicate our thoughts and feelings with others. That's the concept of speech. But now we're saying something very deep. Because if the whole creation of the world was founded on speech, and we said that the speech with which Hashem created the world produced the world of limitation around us, and that's what we call Malchus Peh. Hashem created the world with Asara Ma'amaros, with 10 sayings that are founded on the Aseres HaDibros. It all has to do with speech. And that the world around us, as the Baal HaTanya explains in the first and second prakim to Sha'ar Yichud ve'Emunah, based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, which is founded on the pasuk in Tehillim that says, "L'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim." Hashem, your dibur, your speech, eternally echoes within heaven, within the heavens. And the Baal Shem Tov and the Baal HaTanya speaks very deeply about this. That it's not simply, again, that Hashem, your words are somehow echoing still within creation, those words that you spoke back then. It's much deeper. Hashem, when I look up at the heavens, what I see, when I see the Shemayim, and I see the blue sky or the cloudy sky, depending on where you live, and I see the sun, I see everything that's there, I see Yehi Rakia. That's what I see. That is your words. So the creation is literally the frozen echo. And beyond the echo, it is the frozen communication of Hashem attempting to reach us, attempting to reveal himself. And this very deeply goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the shiur, that it is literally a revelation of God, not just symbolic of a deeper spiritual reality. It is the revelation of divinity. So based on what we said about human speech, which is, of course, again, the same thing, a manifestation of all these concepts, it's only one of 2 steps. Because Dibur didn't happen from nowhere. The Dibur that we see when we look around the world and see Asara Ma'amaros, we see 10 sayings, is only the product of what? Of kol, of voice. And that means to say that the realm of limitation and the realm of specification, the realm of multiplicity, of diversity, that's merumaz, that's hinted to in the distinction between Aleph and Beis and Gimel and Dalet, and all these different letters that when brought together form a multiplicity of different kinds of words that mean a whole different bunch of different things, is all ultimately rooted in a realm that's transcendent, that's beyond, that's the spiritual all-inclusive realm of unity that we refer to as kol, voice. But if you really think about it even more deeply, that level of kol is not really essentially voice-oriented per se. Fundamentally beyond what voice actually is, beyond its form, what its content is breath, is ruach. We breathe in, and then we breathe out in such a way where we utilize our breath to activate the vocal cords, and then kol, voice, is produced, then it comes through the mouth, and it becomes all these different letters and all these different elements. And so the deepest thing that sits at the core of the whole process of speech that ultimately manifests within the created, limited world, which is the presence of the Shekhinah, sort of the indwelling presence of God within our experience of reality. If we referred to the transcendent element of that, we would call that ruach. Now, without getting to the whole thing now, the level of the bride, the level of the Shekhinah, the level of the created realm is wrapped up into the concept of David HaMelech. Malchus, David HaMelech. What was David HaMelech's whole thing? Was dibur, singing, speaking, teaching, composing, writing. Va'ani tefillah, his whole thing was dibur, speaking. Who is, and I don't want to say symbolic, who was the manifestation of this energy of the transcendent, of the chosson? Was Yaakov Avinu. What does it say about Yaakov Avinu? Hakol kol Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu is the element of the kol, of the voice. That's why Yaakov Avinu is connected to the concept of the Torah. Titein emes li Yaakov. Yaakov ish tam, Yoshev halim. Yaakov Avinu is connected to the Torah, which is the level of Torah Shebiksav, comes from Shamayim. That transcendent spiritual energy that's just above and beyond. Hakol kol Yaakov, the element of Ruach. And then ultimately, it channels down into Torah Sheba'al Peh, into the Dibur of it, into the Shechina of it, which is all connected to the concept of David HaMelech. And so how beautiful it is that David HaMelech sings that at midnight, B'chatzois laila akum lach lahoidas hamishbetei tzidkecha, the pasuk says, I get up, David HaMelech saying at midnight to sing your praise. And the Gemara in the beginning of Brachas tells us, how did David HaMelech know when midnight was? Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even seem to know when midnight was. He said, Kachatzois halayla, but David HaMelech knew when midnight was. Says the Gemara, well, he had a harp that was hanging behind his bed. Kinar, a 5-stringed harp, which Rebbe Nachman says is connected to the Chamishe Chumshei Torah, or the 5 books, as the Medrash tells us, of Tehillim. And at midnight, the ruach of a wind came in and played upon the harp. And this, the Sfarim explain, is a yichud of Kudsha B'richu, of the transcendent element of godliness, which is ruach kol, and David HaMelech's klei yad, David HaMelech's instrument in this physical world. It's the mixture of the voice and the dibur. It's a mixture of the unified, godly, divine energy from which everything extends and the created world of multiplicity that's all captured in this experience of human speech, which is a manifestation of all of these deep concepts. And so over here you see that Rebbe Nachman is saying, why do we throw the oifin, why do we throw the grain dafka the chosson? Because the pasuk says over here, El asher yiyah shama haruach, where there is ruach, which we now understand to be embodied by the male, by the element of the transcendent, by Kudsha B'richu, by Yaakov Avinu, as opposed to the feminine element of David HaMelech. Yelchu ha'oifanim. Now, oifanim over here means angels, but Rebbe Nachman says it could also hint to oifin, which is a way of saying chitin, grains. And so wherever the ruach is walking, Shama yelchu ha'ifanim. Over there you're throwing the grains to represent this deep concept that what's happening at the wedding is so much beyond, just this milestone within this chosson's life and with this kallah's life and the implications for the family and the simcha for the community and so on and so forth. It's much deeper, much deeper. So this is helping again anchor us into the realization of what's actually taking place. El asher yiyah shama haruach, the chosson is the ruach, the kallah is the dibur. Yelcho ha'oifanim v'hachosson u'bechinas ruach, and the chosson is the concept of ruach. Let's move on. Masha noisnin kol echad ma'oi shekayrin Shabbos b'shvil hamaraktim. Apparently there was a minhag where they would give money to the dancers, and that money was called Shabbos money. Interesting minhag. I don't think it's still extant today. Where does this come from? Al Shem, the pasuk Tehillim tells us, Malchei tzva'os yidaydun. That the angels, yidaydun, were dancing, were jumping and dancing. Malchei tzva'os yidaydun. Hainohem meraktim. And the pasuk continues, Unavas bayis, which means the glory of the house, a reference to the wife, techalek shalal, gives out the shalal, the spoils, the plenty. Techalek shal, she divides all of the gains. Heim noisnin ma'ay Shabbos b'shvil hamaraktim. So Rebbe Nachman says, what does this mean? Malchei tzva'os yidaydun is a reference to the dancers. Unavas bayis techalek shalal is a reference to giving out money. And so they would give out money for the dancers, and the Rosh Tevas of bayis techalek shalal is Rosh Tevas Shabbos. Shabbos b'shvil. He says this is the source for why we call this money that they would give to the dancers Shabbos. But what's deeper? So the Rebbe explains, Chasana b'chinas Sinai. Chasana, wedding, is an aspect of Har Sinai, which is the ultimate universal wedding between the Creator and the nation that embodies his presence here in the created world for the purpose of teaching all the nations about the indwelling presence of godliness. But that's Am Yisrael that represent the bride, that represent the Shechina. As the Gemara in Tainus tells us, B'yayim chasunasai, the pasuk referring to Shlomo HaMelech on the day of his wedding, but the Gemara in Tainus darshans at Maimed Har Sinai. It's a reference to Har Sinai, Shavuos, Har Sinai. And we know that Sinai is gematria sulam. The word Sinai has the same numerical value as the word sulam, which means a ladder. It means going up and down. V'yakasav, and the pasuk tells us, therefore, V'hine malachi elikim oilim v'yardim bai. That by Yaakov Avinu, Dafka Yaakov Avinu, the concept of the bride, so to speak, the concept of Ruach HaKol Kol Yaakov, the concept of Yaakov Avinu sees a sulam, gematria Sinai, like a wedding. B'yayim chasunas is a b'chinas Matan Torah, is a Maimed Har Sinai. Yaakov Avinu has a ladder, and Oilim V'Yardim, the Malachim are going up and down. Hainu Rikudim. You know what these angels were doing? Says Rebbe Nachman, these angels were dancing at the wedding called Sinai. That's what it means that the Malachi Elikim were Oilim V'Yardim on Yaakov Avinu's Sulam, which is Gematria Sinai. They were dancing. They were dancing at the great wedding that's represented by Yaakov Avinu, who embodies the chosson, and Rachel, Leah, different concepts of the bride. Because that's what we do when we dance. We go up and we go down and we jump and we come back down. This is the way we dance. We move. We go up and down. So again, the reason that we refer to this money as Shabbos money is Rashi Tevis unavas bayis techalik shalal, because the Rashi Tevis of bayis techalik shalal spells the letters Shabbos. Very deep. Very, very deep. So this is why Shabbos money is given to the dancers who are referenced by Malchet Tzva'os Yedoidun Yedoidun. The angels were dancing, a reference to Maimed Har Sinai, and money was given out. And those dancing angels are the same dancing angels of Yaakov Avinu's Sulam, which is Gematria Sinai, going up and down, celebrating the great marriage between Kudsha B'richu, between Hashem and Am Yisrael, the concept of the Shechina, which is experienced in microcosm at every single Jewish wedding between the chosson and the kallah. Moving on, Masha chosson doiresh. Even today we still have some of this minhagim by Sfardim, that the chosson gives and some Hasidim, the chosson gives a drasha. So he says, why is the chosson giving a drasha? Same thing. Because really every Jewish wedding is a microcosmic experience of Matan Torah. But go deeper, because Matan Torah was only a microcosmic or a macrocosmic universal experience of, again, what sits at the core of all of creation, which is the Ruach of Hashem that produces kol as manifest within the created world. So it's the most universal thing there is. So it isn't just that a wedding is just like Har Sinai. No. Har Sinai is just like everything. Right? So the wedding is just like everything. It's just about the deepest experience of the truth of reality, that whatever multiplicity we see around us is actual, which is the concept of dibur, different letters that produce different words that refer to different concepts and ideas, are all rooted back in one unified source. That's what it is. That's what Har Sinai was, and that's what the wedding is. So b'yayim chasunas is a Maimed Har Sinai. So it's remez to Maimed Har Sinai. So what happened on Maimed Har Sinai? We got the Torah. Says Rebbe Nachman, good. So at every wedding there needs to be Torah. B'shvil zahu dairish. So the chosson, the transcendent element, so to speak, needs to darshan. That's a concept of giving the Torah. He needs to give a Torah. He needs to say a dvar Torah. One of the reasons that we give money, again, it used to be this minhag, money for the chosson's drasha. This is called drasha geshank, which means a gift for the wedding. I'm sorry, a gift for the drasha, for the discourse. Is lirma is to hint about the pasuk also until Malisa Lamarim. You went up, Moshe Rabbeinu, unto high in the heavens, Shavisa Shevi, and you captured a captive, Shavisa Shevi. Should be a schus for all the captives. They should be able to come home to their husbands and their wives and their children and sons and daughters. Ali Salamare Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemaim Shavisa Shevi, and you captured a captive, which is the Torah B'Shvil Zeh, and the pasuk continues Lakachta Matanos LaAdam Ba'Adam, and you took presents from people. Says Rebbe Nachman, these two things are together, the taking of the Torah and the giving of gifts. So, we give gifts to the chosson, who in telling divrei Torah at the wedding is a concept of the giving of the Torah that took place at Har Sinai, which again is manifested within the universal, within the particular experience of each and every chosson and kallah at their own weddings. Masha chosson darish hadrasha, why it is, or says Rebbe Nachman, you should know that what the chosson does when he gives his drasha, himo elis lazivugim. This brings about other unifications on many, many, many levels of existence. Both it helps his own zivug, just on a pragmatic level. I think every kallah would appreciate if our chosson is able to get up and say divrei Torah. It helps the shalom bayis, it helps the connection, the zivug, but it also helps in many, many different realms. As the pasuk says, vayishkav b'makom ahu, that a reference to Yaakov Avinu, again the ultimate chosson, very deep way, before he sees the Sulam, Sinai, and before the Malach Elikim Oilim Yarden Boy, Malchet Sevakos Yedodun, before the dancing of the great wedding, of the unification of that element of creator with a conscious creation, Shechina. Yaakov Avinu lays down, Vayishkav b'makom ahu, and he sleeps in that place. Say Chazal, Yesh chaf beis osios. Vayishkav, which means he slept in that place, can be seen as two words. V'yesh chaf beis. Not just Vayishkav and he laid down, but rather there are 22. A reference to the 22 letters of the Aleph beis. Hadrasha shi b'chaf beis oisios heim lazivuk. And so when the chosson gives his drasha using the letters of the Aleph beis, this makes all kinds of zivugim, of deep spiritual unifications between all of these different letters that is happening within the context of yichud, which is what a wedding is all about. Rebbe Nachman continues, and this is relevant to this week's parsha, hapristakis. This is a Yiddish word which refers to like silly kinds of dancing, pizer v'chircher, sha'osim v'shas rikudim, probably that was experienced by dipping down very low and then coming back up in the dancing. Zebechinas. This is the deep concept of the pasuk Anochi Ered Imcha Mitzrayim. Hashem tells Yaakov Avinu, I'm going to go down with you into Mitzrayim. Because there are always challenges in relationships. That's why relationships are the greatest arena for spiritual growth. Because there's a Mitzrayim in relationships, just like there's Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Tova Rechava in relationships. There are experiences of constriction and experiences of expansivity, because that's the human experience, which is so beautiful. Because it provides us the capacity to really grow. It's an Ezer, because sometimes it's Kenegda. Sometimes it's Kenegda. So Anochi Ered Imcha Mitzrayim. That's part of the dance. That's part of the dance. You dip down in the dance. There's a concept of the way in which sometimes Am Yisrael, the Shechina goes down into Mitzrayim. And there's a nituk, there's a disconnect between the Shechina and Kudsha B'richu. And Am Yisrael are in a state of constriction where they are referred to by the pasuk that tells us they cannot handle the work because of Koitzer Ruach. Which means that Kudsha B'richu, which is the Bechina of Yaakov Avinu, the Ruach, the transcendent element of the voice, is disconnected from Am Yisrael in an experience of constriction, Mitzrayim, where they see each letter in and of itself without seeing what binds them together, without feeling Hashem's presence in the world. Koitzer Ruach, Mitzrayim. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises, but don't worry, V'anoichi a'alcha, I will bring you back up. And the Berditch of a Rav, Sichos HaRan Kedushas Levi, teaches that these words, Anoichi, are a reference to Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 commandments, the Aseres HaDibros. Hashem was saying, don't worry, Anoichi Eridim Chamitzrayim. Deep, 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 deep way, the Torah is going down with you into Mitzrayim. I'm with you there too. Va'anoichi alcha, and the Torah is ultimately the purpose for which I will bring you out and take you across that journey of the desert and through Kriyas Yamsuf and the Yamsuf in the desert up until Sinai, so that you and I can dance together, so that you and I can celebrate together in the deepest yichud intimacy. Ki Galus Mitzrayim, because Galus Mitzrayim b'shvil of our nitzaytzik kari shal adam rishon. The Arizal explains was in some way a deep tikkun for some kind of aveira that was done in this area of zivug by adam rishon, immorality, disconnect, selfishness. V'hachasana, and a chasana is mamish hu tikkun v'yichad abris, is the ultimate tikkun of that relationship. It is the tikkun, it's the aliyah after the yerida to Mitzrayim that was bound to Adam Arishon's lack of utilizing the relationship in a productive way. So this is all, again, this is how Rebbe Nachman understood the simple human modes of celebration. What you and I see is just a cute dance that somebody's doing, and look at this guy, he's really getting into it, and he's going down, he's coming up. Rebbe Nachman is seeing the deepest spiritual concepts. Anoichi yered imcha mitzrayma, anoichi olcha gam alei. And if you happen to be privileged to be a chosson, Be'ezras Hashem, whoever's waiting for their zivug should have that experience. If you happen to be privileged enough to be a kallah, Be'ezras Hashem, whoever's waiting for their zivug should have the privilege of that experience. Keep this in mind, all of this in mind. Chazer this if you need to, because your wedding is mamish, a step toward the geula, is the yichud of Kutsh B'richa and Shchinte. And when you're dancing, you're going to want to have these concepts in mind, because you'll be able to experience your wedding not just as a wedding that may have some spiritual significance on some symbolic level. No, your wedding is literally an immersive experience of the deepest Kabbalistic yichudim that will ever take place in history. So you're going to want to have all of this in mind and utilize your small particularist experience as a window into the essence of being, mamish, the essence of all there is. Anoichi eirid imcha mitzrayim anoichi alcha gam alei. Let's finish. Masha poiskinas hadrasha, says Rebbe Nachman, good. If the drasha is the concept of Har Sinai, because the Torah was given it to the chosson, gives a speech. So why always by chassanim, by Sheva Brachas particularly, everybody's always interrupting him the second he starts to speak, or is this, they don't let him get a word out, says Rebbe Nachman, this is the concept of Moshe breaking the luchas. Again, alluding to the concept that the chosson is not just a chosson who happens to be giving divrei Torah. It is an aspect of Kutsh B'richa giving the Torah. So in order to fortify this, we separate, because there also has to be an aspect of shivrei luchas there too. And finally, the last 2 points, Hashoishvin malbish hakitol hachosson. We see that the shoishvin, the one who's going to be accompanying the chosson down the aisle, dresses the chosson in a kittel. What's the remez there? The remez is v'Yosef Yashas Yada Alinecha. The pasuk says HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises Yaakov Avinu, Yosef will lay his hand on your eyes, a reference to Yaakov Avinu passing away. So we don't have time to get into the spiritual root of this, but Yosef hu shoishvin. Not getting into this now. Yosef HaTzadik represents the one who accompanies, because Yosef is the spiritual level in between Yaakov and David. Not getting into that now. Just a remez, Rashi Prakim for those who are familiar. Yosef, the Sphira of Yesod, bridges Malchus and Tiferes, Shechina and Kutsh B'richa. So to speak, Yosef, and that's why Yosef goes down to Mitzrayim before Yaakov gets there, he accompanies the chosson, so to speak, toward the kallah. And so the pasuk refers to the shoshvin as saying, Yosef will place his hand upon your eyes. That's a reference to Yaakov Avinu and Yosef accompanying Yaakov. And the kittel hu beged mesim. The kittel is a reference to death. And so the shoshvin, who is accompanying the chosson, who is the concept of Yosef, is putting on the beged mesim, which is the concept of Yosef Yashas Yadcha Alinecha, which of course alludes back to what we began with in the beginning, which is a very deep sod, about not having eyes, about the deep concept of Shema Yisrael, about being dead, so to speak, to our own understanding, being able to connect to a realm that's beyond our lived experience of corporeal reality in the physical realm. Ulemta shapirta d'lesle einen. So the kallah has that experience when the veil is placed over her head, and the chosson has that experience when the beged mesim is placed on him by the shoshvin of Yosef. And finally, we conclude, and what a privilege, Mamash Hatziyata D'Shmaya, to get through all of this. I know I said a lot. If you need to chazer and review, definitely do. There's a lot here, so much depth, but it's so essential. It's not just like different ramazim to nice things. This is the essence of what it means to be a Jew. This is the fundamental premise of our being in this world, is to make this yichud, is to draw a direct line between creation to the Creator. So he finishes Mashama Hapchenes Atzman, why people do somersaults or tumble sauces, depending on which culture you're from. And in weddings, Zebechinas, this is the deep concept of Umoisha Allah. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Shemayim. So something from the lower realm went up to the higher realm. And Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, something from the higher realm came down to the lower realm. That's the concept of a tumble sauce or a somersault. Right, where the feet go up and the head comes down, and the feet are in the air and the head is lower, and then it flips back. That's the concept of the feet, Moshe Rabbeinu, going up to Shemayim, and the head, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, coming down to the Tachtonim. Everything in the whole wedding, wrapped up in the Marmar Chazal and the Gemara in Tainis, Yoim Chasu Nasa is a Matan Torah, is a reference to the giving of the Torah, which itself is the deepest expression universally of the fundamental premise of why we have the Torah, which is to try to train our consciousness to be able to live with the deep realization that, again, although it looks like we're living in the Olam HaGashmi, which is so menutak, so removed from the spiritual realm, we can train ourselves to see Hashem wherever we look and wherever we walk. That's what's called halacha, halicha, to walk with Hashem, to be able to feel Hashem's presence, not in some abstract way, but in a really lived experiential way, in every food that we eat, in every drink that we drink, in every nap that we take, in every person we hang out with, and every circumstance that we experience at every age and stage throughout life. That's what it means to be a Yid. Habakkuk looked at all of Yiddishkeit and he summed it up with just one little saying. V'tzadik be'emunah yichya. It's all about emunah, but not just any emunah. Mamish, to live with emunah. And so that's really what it comes down to. That's what the chosson is. That's what chosson and kallah are. That's what Har Sinai is. That's what this whole great love affair between the Creator and His creations is all about, so that we should wake up to find Him, not just symbolically, but to wake up and find Him in everything. Where there's this deep yichud, where everything that seems to be tachton is elevated to the highest realms, and we understand that, something that was so deeply abstract, no, it's here. The Elyonim is Yord Lamata, and that is the ultimate yichud, the tikkun, where the kallah is lifted to the level of the chosson comes to meet the kallah, and there's a perfect yichud between them, Kutchabrichu and Shchinte, so that going back to the beginning, Be'ezus Hashem, they should all be able to be oile, Allah, which began with, into the great joke of Emunah, into the great joke of Azim Ali Schaik Pinu, that the whole thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is handling it. Hashem is running the show, and we just have no eyes, and we are Ulemta Shapirta Lesle Einen, and that ultimately we should be able to live lives of Simcha, Toiv, and Tainug, that Be'ezus Hashem, they should be, that's what we say, the Zivuk should be Oile Yafez, all right? It should be Oile, it should go up together. Allah, remez she'isha oile imai ve'eni yeredes imai. Be'ezus Hashem, that should be the case for all the chasanim and the kallahs, and everybody should find their zivug, so that we can continue to play our role in the best possible way to bring about the great zivug between the transcendent divinity of the Creator and the latent potential for creation to be perceived as being absolutely filled with that energy of the divine. And we can bring the world closer and closer to the Geula Shlema. B'kar b'yameinu. Amen v'amen. Be'ezus Hashem. Yashar Koach. Thank you guys so much for being here, each and every one of you. And we should share only in simchas together. Siyata D'Shmaya. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Ashreinu. Ashreinu.